You could almost make the argument that a bone broth product could fit better with a sweet green or Mendocino salad or healthier sandwich.
One, two, three.
Coming up, we're back with Jack on our strategy series focusing on the fast casual chain Mount Joy. The Modern Acre podcast explores the latest in business, investing, technology, and sustainability in agriculture, and we're your hosts, Tyler and Tim Nuss. If you'd like to dig deeper with the Modern Acre, join our membership community, the Modern Acre Co-op. The Modern Acre podcast is presented by Pinion. The economics of farming are increasingly difficult, and many producers are asking Pinion, the leading food and ag business advisory firm, questions around thin margins and cash flow. Farmers want to know how to calculate the total cost of running the business and determine their farm's true break-even. The answer is twofold. First, calculating beyond the field is critical. Second, ensure you know your true costs. If you're struggling with this, Pinion advisors can perform financial calculations that identify places to cut expenses and ways to optimize your farm business. Learn more at pinionglobal.com or hit the link in our show notes.
Ty, glad to be back on the horn with Jack, talking about his latest edition of the Modern Acre newsletter, talking about the fast casual chain Mount Joy. This is a company that we had their co-founder Grant on a little over a year ago, just talking about the idea that they had. They were a pop-up at the time. They've since got their first brick and mortar store in Seattle, Washington. So it was cool to kind of dig into this business and their approach to sourcing regenerative ingredients.
For those of you who didn't hear our first conversation with Jack, Jack is a strategy expert in agriculture. He's been at a few ag tech startups currently with CNH, and he's digging in on certain companies, certain areas of agriculture to dig in on the strategy around the business model. So we had our first conversation about a month or so back, all about Maui Nui. We'll link that in the show notes. Be sure to listen to that one if you haven't already. And his second edition of the newsletter is all about Mount Joy. So we're kind of doing, two-pronged content here, Tim. We are doing similar to how we do with Ariel when she comes on to talk about her topsoil newsletter. This one, Jack has done a deep dive strategy newsletter that you should subscribe to. It's on the Modern Acre Substack. Go subscribe to the newsletter and then come listen to the color commentary, if you will, Tim. You get the one version of the newsletter, really detailed. You got great graphics that Jack puts together. And then, you can come just hang with the crew on the podcast as we really digest the topic altogether.
Great overview, Ty. Yeah, I think the conversation with Jack is just really color commentary, just talking about his process, his analysis, or really a double click into the newsletter itself.
Jack, it's great to have you back on the pod. We're 2 newsletters into this thing of doing kind of a strategy series on these different ag businesses, you diving deep into these companies and really doing some analysis, some strategy around what these companies can and should be doing, how they should be thinking about structuring the business model. We had a ton of good feedback on your first newsletter with Maui Nui. We released the second newsletter a few weeks ago, Mount Joy. Let's start with Mount Joy, Jack. Who is Mount Joy? Give us a rundown and overview of the company Mount Joy.
Yeah, sure thing, Ty, and thanks again for having me on again to both of you. So Mount Joy is a fast casual fried chicken chain based in Seattle, Washington. What is unique about Mount Joy is they source their chickens from both local farms that are raising their chickens in a pasture-raised, regenerative manner. Mount Joy, over the last couple of years, started with various pop-up stores to test initial demand. And as of a few months ago, they launched their first permanent brick-and-mortar store coupled with a food truck.
Yeah, it's a super interesting case study. We had them on probably over a year and a half ago when they were still in that pop-up phase of the business, really trying to find product market fit. And I think it's a really interesting way to like design a restaurant and like find product market fit early, doing pop-ups like that and kind of rethinking how you build a restaurant, starting with the ingredients and then kind of backing into what products can we make with these ingredients versus the other way of just starting a restaurant is sourcing ingredients from wherever. So they've been really thoughtful about how they've gone about sourcing. But maybe just talk to us, like in your analysis, like who is their target market? It's a little bit different of a take on restaurant, really focusing on sourcing. Like who does this appeal to? Who are their target customers?
Sure. So noted that Mountjoy is fast casual. I think it's worthwhile to take a step back to understand why someone may purchase from a fast casual chain, and at the same time, why someone may purchase from a fast food chain. So starting with the latter, actually, fast food. People eat fast food for a number of reasons. One, it tastes good, it's cheap, and it's convenient. Now, regarding fast casual, people eat fast casual because it's healthy/healthier. It also tastes good. It's relatively affordable, and it's relatively convenient, albeit not as ubiquitous as fast food. And as you think of a Venn diagram of the people who eat fast food, who eat fast casual, there certainly are people who only eat one of the category, but I think most people, there's a sizable overlap. Some people eat fast food, and then those same people also eat fast casual. So as we think of the target customer for Mountjoy, the reason why I think this exercise is important, if I were to quote the villain in The Incredibles, if everyone is special, then no one is. It's worthwhile to really dig in to understand who is Mountjoy's target customer, so they can in turn market and advertise to that target customer. So I think their target customer is three different personas. The first of which is the foodie, the person who seeks out fried chicken. They are willing to drive, call it more than around their block, to find the best fried chicken in their town. And they prioritize taste over everything else being nutrition, price, convenience. I believe when this person finds Mountjoy in turn exposes this person to pasture-raised and regenerative agriculture for the first time. This person isn't necessarily seeking out Mountjoy because of those reasons, so that there's an exposure, there's the education piece, which in turn explains why the price is higher at Mountjoy versus a competitor like a Chick-fil-A, for example. And as we kind of zoom out, Mountjoy, relatively speaking, is early innings of their growth trajectory. I do believe over the next decade that taste will become the number one reason why Mountjoy will succeed or not, because I believe the foodie represents their largest target customer cohort.
I think this is a really important point, and when you go to develop a business, to think about your target customer. And I think what's interesting about Mountjoy's approach is what I've seen a lot in the kind of regenerative sourced food brand / restaurant space is there is a substantial overlap with health and regenerative agriculture. And Mountjoy's kind of taking a little unique spin on it. It's not necessarily the healthiest, and I think you're going to get into this. And so that's another reason why it does need to be an A+ in taste, right? Because for the health conscious, which are often those folks that are really have a passionate like health and wellness relationship to regenerative agriculture. We've talked to a ton of people on the podcast that's how they found regenerative agriculture, was through their own health journey. And so thinking through that, I think there is some tension there that Mountjoy can overcome through having the best tasting chicken sandwich regardless in the market.
Yeah, agreed, Ty. And, with the thinking that if you are raising animals, in this case chicken, on a more natural diet, you're giving them significant exposure to roaming versus being confined in a cage, then that in turn is going to produce higher quality meat, higher or better tasting food. So yes, that's the first target customer I have. The second is, if I had to summarize this person, I'm a busy working professional, but I don't want to eat a salad nor bowl every single day. So this person's frequenting Sweetgreen often. They probably joined up for the Sweetgreen Plus, paying $10 a month, but they're looking to mix it up. Maybe it's a Friday, they're going out for lunch with their colleagues, assuming they're back in office, and they want a tasty fried chicken sandwich. So they are going to treat themselves to a chicken sando at Mountjoy. This person is used to spending, call it $14, $15, $16 for a Sweetgreen or an equivalent fast casual spot. So the price point of Mountjoy is very much in line with their expectations.
This is real. Like my wife and I struggle with this super hard. We, cook at home as much as possible, but when we DoorDash and need to order for convenience, there's just not a ton of options for the healthy option. And unless we're wanting to just get a Mendocino Farms bowl every day or a Sweetgreen bowl, like there are those days where, we're having more of a cheat meal, right? And we want something that tastes good, that's relatively convenient. And I feel like that hits Mountjoy's hitting that of that Friday afternoon, that Friday evening meal. So I definitely resonate with this target customer.
Yeah, absolutely. So the last and third persona that I wrote about, again, if I were to summarize who this person is, I come for the transparency because Mountjoy at its core values a transparent supply chain, listing out every ingredient. So I come for the transparency. I stay for the fried chicken, but I may not return because of the cooking oil. So let's unpack that. One, this touches upon taste, staying for the fried chicken. But two, the cooking oil, what does this mean? This persona cares a heck of a lot about what they put in their body. It may be to achieve short-term health goals. We kind of speaking about that. Or it could be part of their grand longevity plan. And that is influenced by other podcasters, the likes of Huberman, Atia, Paul Saladino, some of which have really started to villainize cooking oil, commonly used cooking oil, whether that's canola or vegetable oils. So yes, this person might try Mountjoy, but if they were looking to consistently stop by Mountjoy, let's call it on a weekly or a monthly basis, then the cooking oil used may be a barrier to entry because of their understanding of potential negative health implications. So why is this important? Because yes, it sounds like a very small minority, but despite it being a small minority, 3 fast casual chains have already taken notice: Sweetgreen, Chipotle, and Shake Shack. So Sweetgreen last year replaced their high oleic sunflower oil with olive oil and avocado oil. And then both Shake Shack and Chipotle are testing out Zero Acre Farms cultured oil, which I know the two of you guys interviewed Jeff at Zero Acre last year. They're fermenting an oil, a high smoke point, a better omega-3, omega-6 ratio. And so I do think it's interesting that 3 very established fast casual chains are moving in this direction.
Yeah, this one is super interesting. It's probably the smallest segment of target customers, but I think probably the quickest growing of like the villainization and like awareness around industrial seed oils. Just like it seems to come up like once a week on stuff that I'm consuming as a consumer. So if a company's actually able to plant a flag and say like we don't use any seed oils, hard stop, I think they would attract a lot of people to that. Like people with families that are normally going to McDonald's to get their Happy Meal. If there was an alternative option where it's that fast casual experience, they can get a meal for their kids or themselves and not have to worry about the seed oils. I think that's going to be like the biggest uptick in trends of the 3 target consumers we're talking about here.
I want to make one last comment. Let's understand where Mountjoy is in their growth trajectory. They have 1 permanent store. The reason why I know they use canola oil is because they provide transparency. They list out every single ingredient. So that alone, they deserve immense credit for. They could very much change the cooking oil they're using in the short or medium term. So just want to make sure your audience members know the wins they've already had.
Yeah, the transparency thing is huge. And I think like the fact that they're at 1 store, like they could probably implement these changes versus like if you're a McDonald's or a Burger King, like trying to switch out the cooking oils you use is just like a monstrous task. It changes the whole business model and economics that they've built. So being able to like kind of build this from the ground up into the business model, I think puts them in a unique advantage.
All right, Jack. So what does this mean? Let's take it to the next phase. So you establish these target customers. What's next in your newsletter?
Next up, I spoke about Mountjoy's strategy to initially launch through pop-up stores. And it kind of gets to a point that we were talking about earlier, that despite Mountjoy having differentiation in their sourcing strategy, sourcing pasture-raised regenerative chickens, we're kind of coming to the conclusion, and I don't know if the industry is here, and this will be proven out, but your sourcing alone does not necessarily justify building a standalone brand. You have to have something else. In the case of Mountjoy, they are trying to build a fun, exciting brand. And I think they're trying to do that, in this case, by starting with pop-up stores. I live in New York. Pop-up stores, truly, people will bend over backwards. They will walk 45 minutes to go to a pop-up store to sample something for free. And so, like, what are the benefits of a pop-up store? Well, we just spoke about kind of stoking customer excitement, kind of the FOMO, try it now, or you may miss your opportunity. But there are other benefits. It's kind of analogous to software's MVP, minimum viable product. If you're an investor or the management team, you are committing minimal resources to testing initial product demand. And then that allows you to quickly iterate. And in the case of physical retail, retailers spend significant capital on capital improvements, repainting, reconfiguring the inside of the retail store. And again, a pop-up store enables management to bypass these upfront capital improvement costs while, again, proving out initial demand.
I think it's super important. The lean startup point is a huge one, right? Of how can you test, iterate quickly. We mentioned how it's a blessing in disguise that Mountjoy is in the early innings, because they can pivot, they can innovate, they can listen to this podcast and say, all right, yeah, like let's make this switch, because they're not in a ton of retail stores, because they're testing with consumers. They can iterate really quickly, and I think that's a really valuable exercise when building a brand and launching something new.
Jack, let's get into the next piece, talking about like how Mountjoy can upsell customers. They're coming for a chicken sandwich. Like, how can you build on top of this to create more value for consumers coming in the door and Mountjoy itself?
So today, Mountjoy sells both white meat and dark meat chicken sandwiches. They do this on the basis of unit economics, because if you go to a fried chicken chain today, you'll very rarely see the dark meat chicken sandwiches. The reason they do it is because at their lower order volumes, Mountjoy has to buy an entire whole chicken from those local farmers, whereas most other large restaurants and chains, they're typically only purchasing the breast or the wings. So for Mountjoy, they then have the onus to make use of either all of the meat or more of the meat, hence the introduction of the less common dark meat chicken sandwich. And when I first listened to Grant on the Modern Acre podcast episode last year, I thought the next natural step was to introduce a regenerative chicken bone broth. There's a couple reasons why. One, introducing bone broth product enables Mountjoy to ride the tailwinds of increasing customer awareness for bone broth. And then two, upsell customers, increasing a key metric for retailers, that being average order value, or AOV.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. There's a local restaurant in my town that focuses on regenerative sourcing, and like one of the options when you go eat there, like there's the dessert part of the menu, and then below that there's kind of like take-home options, and they have bone broth there where like they're cooking with all these ingredients instead of dumping it down the drain. Why don't they offer this as something a consumer can take home and be like thinking about the restaurant, thinking about regenerative agriculture, be thinking about the benefits of bone broth even after they visit the restaurant. So I like where your head's at, thinking about this possible add-on to the business.
Yeah, and let's really dig into bone broth and that market size. Who are the players today? What sales channels do they pursue? Bone broth in years past used to be, or I should say decades past, used to be viewed as a cooking ingredient. But I would say largely thanks to a brand like Kettle and Fire, bone broth, when slow simmered, is now a popular health and wellness product based on both the high collagen protein and amino acid content. I believe bone broth and other leading bone broth brands are expanding the TAM, the total addressable market, by one, bringing new customers to the bone broth market. I can speak to myself as being such a customer, and two, increasing annual customer spend. So let's take a persona of the bone broth market in decades past. Let's say my grandma. So my grandma would presumably buy a few cartons of bone broth every year, really to be used in stews. But now you have a segment of the bone broth consumers literally drinking multiple cartons of bone broth every week, maybe half a carton every day, for the health benefits, for the amino acids, for the protein. And so the last point is, since these new age bone broth brands are also often sourcing grass-fed and pasture-raised bones, the selling price is also higher. All of these factors are now increasing the market size for bone broth. I think it is interesting, and I assume Mountjoy will be collecting this data of, I've just been making the argument that the bone broth TAM has been expanding for use of health and wellness. Well, someone going to dine at Mountjoy is not there necessarily for the health and wellness aspect. So introducing the bone broth product might be incongruent with a fried chicken sandwich. You could almost make the argument that a bone broth product could fit better with a sweet green or Mendocino salad or healthier sandwich. But again, this is too early to be proven out, but I think it would be an interesting perspective for Mountjoy to keep in mind.
Yeah, this has been awesome digging into this business. I think it's fun to focus on a business that's relatively earlier stage and kind of see what the potential looks like for this kind of a business versus businesses that have been in market for a decade plus, kind of getting into where that at. So I like talking about an early stage company and kind of the opportunities there.
All right, guys, hope you enjoyed that conversation with Jack. Subscribe to the newsletter. That's all you got to do here. Go click the link in the show notes so that you can get Jack's next edition. Will be coming out in the next few weeks. You won't want to miss it. Straight to your inbox, the Modern Acre Substack. Smash that link in the show notes, and we will talk to you next week.